and welcome to the Ultimate Strategy Podcast, your go-to podcast for everything strategy. Each week, we'll share a new episode covering a wide range of topics designed to help your business grow smarter by making strategy both approachable and actionable. I am Miriam and Laura, Strategy Execution Director at Cascade.
And I'm Laura Blackmore, Head of Strategy Execution. Hi and welcome. We are so excited to have you with us today, and this is just the beginning, so stay tuned for weekly episodes. Before we dive in, let me thank today's sponsor, Cascade. Cascade is the #1 strategy execution platform that helps turn visions into reality by working as the strategic brain of your organization. Thousands of businesses around the world use Cascade to plan, execute, and track their strategies, all in one place, improving efficiency and speeding up decision-making. By successfully executing their strategies, Cascade customers are making a huge difference, from deploying life-saving vaccines to engineering the fastest Formula One car. If you want to get your team moving towards your vision in one central platform, check out Cascade at www.cascade.app, and we'll leave a link in the episode notes. Now, let's get started. Miriam, why don't you kick us off with today's topic? We are going to be just having a frank conversation about navigating a reorganization whilst also rolling out your strategy. Sounds pretty tough.
It is tough, I think. And that's why we really want to dive into this and have an open conversation about our own experiences, but also what we have seen customers go through. And lastly, we definitely want to end on like giving you some best practice tips, but also just a bit of some guideline that can help you navigate through these really tough changes. And I think we always have to think about, how does a reorganization happen? And I think there are usually a couple of different sources, right? Like maybe there is a big merger or an acquisition or worst case, even some cost cutting. But like connected to strategy, there are oftentimes two big elements as well that I think stand out and that I see most often. Is either there's maybe just like fragmented plans and teams don't really know where to start, and then they consolidate and start building a strategy. And as they're building a strategy and build out a bit of a bigger goal, they see, oh, maybe we don't really need to go in this direction anymore, but rather we move into and evolve into a different direction. So that means a reorganization can happen and is likely a good thing to happen. Another thing that I see obviously is building the strategy top down, and teams realize, okay, as we're building out this strategy, there are these elements, or we're going into one direction or another direction, and all of a sudden you see how processes can be organized in a much more efficient way. I think the outcome is always very similar, but the reason how you get there can be very, very different. So yeah, Laura, curious to hear from you as well. Like, what have you experienced or seen with customers that you've worked with, and how they ended up maybe in a reorganization and at the same time still needed to roll out their strategy?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I'm seeing it more and more often, or maybe more and more commonly. I don't know. I think there's two major areas where I'm seeing reorgs at the moment. The first one is obviously the traditional cost cutting, or realizing that actually we don't need quite so many people because we have access to technology like AI. I've definitely seen that. The second one, again, it's a bit depending on the industry, but I've seen, these big pivots, for example, an organization saying, you know what we're doing is not working. We're going to completely pivot in a different direction. And that can be almost like a bit of a shakeup and then a reorg. It's like, we shake up, get rid of entire leadership teams. I've seen that recently as well in some specific markets, completely shake up the organization, start from scratch and rehire. So I've definitely seen that. Obviously the classic mergers and acquisitions. But I think just the way that the world is changing now, and the rate at which technology changes, the way that consumers are changing their buying habits, the crisis and the wars that we're having, it feels to me like organizations are really making these big pivots and big swings quite quickly. But I think, that can sound quite negative, but I think it's also a superb opportunity to inject that kind of fresh energy or fresh perspective and re-augment or realign the organization on a really strong mission and being really results led. I think, obviously at the beginning, there's a lot of confusion. You might lose a few people, but the reality is, if you've got a good set of strong people who are really bought into either your optimized or your new mission, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of take stock and refocus and get everybody to really, realign through this reorg. It's always a scary time. It's always a confusing time. But I think there's some things we can share today around how you can do that well, whilst also navigating the strategy side as well.
Yeah. And I think that's really what we want to focus on today, right? It is that side of where we see opportunity when reorganization meets a new strategy rollout. And in whatever position you might find yourself as a listener, whether you're in a strategy team or you are a CEO or you're just like part of evolving the organization further towards those new ambitious goals, you might find some helpful tips and tricks in today's episode. And why don't we get started with how to successfully navigate a change like that, and especially like with that focus on the new strategy rollout. I feel like I went through a couple of reorganizations myself in my past roles at Adidas, but also at Siemens. And I was leading one reorganization myself, and I was affected by one reorganization myself. And both times it was apparently like part of a bigger strategic plan. But one time it felt like it was truly part of a strategic plan, and the other time it felt like it was not really part of a strategic plan. So I think I want to start with like the first pillar that we see as we navigate through that change and through at the same time a new strategy rollout. The first pillar is really around clarity. You want to give your employees, your teams, clarity about like, why is this happening and what are the objectives that you're trying to achieve with this reorganization. At the end of the day, you want to connect the purpose of the reorganization back to the strategic goals. And of course, along the way, show empathy, because as we said before, either way, even if it is a very positive change and you're communicating everything in the right way, you will still find people and have people and teams that might not agree and that might have maybe a little bit more legacy thinking and don't really see that opportunity. That's just almost unavoidable. But at the end of the day, you also want to, of course, focus on the organization and the growth and how you can drive not only your results and the impact that you can have with this reorganization, but also how you can get the majority of people moving forward, seeing an opportunity in this like new evolution of that comes with a reorganization along with the strategy rollout. That's what I've seen like works best in terms of really setting the tone in the beginning of a reorganization. But there are a couple more elements, and it just doesn't stop there, right? Like I think we'll see a red thread throughout all of these pillars, and I think the red thread is going to be the people. But Laura, tell me a little bit more. What do you see as well?
Yeah, I think for me, the second pillar would be communication. I think, of course, it's very important to get clarity, but if you're getting clarity and only a few people know about it and understand it, that can also be dangerous. So I think making sure that communication is really strong throughout the whole process, the before, the during, and even the after. I think, particularly with a reorg, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty in general at the moment. The market has gone crazy. There's a lot of unemployment. People are fearful. So when you hear that, we're going to make some changes and we're going to reorg and we're maybe going to lose some potentially great people, there's a lot of resistance that will come from your people. And I think if you don't communicate that well and cut through that fear and that noise and be transparent as much as you can, being clear, giving clarity, connecting the purpose and making sure that everybody is just super clear. It's like almost over communicating and being honest about what's going on and where we're heading as a direction. I think that is really important, and obviously that connects to the people, which we know is going to be a common thread. I think just really reiterating the why, having an open and ongoing dialogue with people as you navigate this. I think, people can feel, like I said, quite fearful, but also they can start looking in the future and not seeing a future for them. And I think it's really important to help people go through that. I think what a lot of businesses might tend to do is say, it's okay, like you're not going to be affected. But I think the reality is you can't always say that with a reorg. So I think just helping people to understand the role that they're going to play, connecting their purpose, making it clear what their role is in it, and making the narrative focus on the future. I think that's the most important piece, is that you can take people on this journey, but at the end of the day, the future is bright, and that's why we're doing a reorg. Where we're heading is a new direction so that we can be more successful than we are today. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And I think if you focus on that kind of future success and future purpose, people can really buy into that. And if they don't, that's on them. But hopefully most people connect with that purpose. They connect with where the business is heading. Hopefully they understand it. But if they don't, obviously communicating that is really important. But encouraging feedback from people. I think there's a misconception often that all leaders have all of the answers, but that's not true. So you need to be able to take people on that journey, get their feedback, help them to help you find things that, blind spots that maybe you haven't seen. So I think that would be it for me. I think that's a big, very important pillar.
Yeah, I agree so much. This open dialogue is really key. And when I was leading the reorganization for a bigger group at Adidas, one thing that we did that I think that worked well and that I've seen other organizations do as well, especially when it comes to communication, is don't just I think there are two elements. Like, don't just wait for like something to be ready to communicate it. Constantly also communicate the progress, and the progress both of where you stand in the process of the reorganization, but of course, since this is connected to your strategy, just pull it like all together and show like how does it connect to the bigger picture. The other thing that I would do, or that I would suggest, is to not only think about the leadership communicates, let's say, in an all hands or all employee meeting, but also having one-on-ones, either with smaller teams or either having some of the team leads, having one-on-one check-ins with specific team members. Because at the end of the day, even if some individuals might know, oh, I will not be affected by this reorganization, but their team members might be, or their colleagues might be, or their friends might be, and it's hard, or they might need to play the role of letting people go, which is also super hard. So all of that is really hard. So having your team ready, and that might probably be a team of mix of like maybe someone from HR, maybe you bring in someone from external as well to help navigate through it, depending on the size and the impact of the change, to really support people throughout that period, and also make sure that you set them up at the right point in time already for like a success or a future after maybe their career might end with your current organization. So I think there are very different ways how you can really put people first. And I want to say that thing because I always talk a little bit about Adidas as well. But what really just stuck with me all these years, our former president from North America, Zion Armstrong, he's an amazing leader. And he always said, he's from New Zealand originally, and he would always say in all of his all-employee meetings, so whenever he communicated something, and he brought that analogy up consistently, but he would always start with e tangata, e tangata, e tangata, which means the people, the people, the people, and putting people first. It just like was this powerful way of communicating, you're my priority and I want to take care of you. But of course, I also have the priority to drive the business into the right direction, into the future. And this is like how we can all help together to get the best out of this reorganization and the strategy. So that's something that I'm always like keeping in mind when I think about any changes coming, putting the people first.
I love that. And I think that kind of reminded me of the the examples from like the Microsofts or the Adobes or even the Apples of the world, where you have these really strong leaders who are putting their people first. They're leading by example essentially, but it's always about the people. And obviously there's unfortunately always cost cutting exercises that happen at these large organizations, but when they do transform their organizations, like Adobe from traditional software sales to a subscription-based model, um, you know, that strategy and the reorg were quite tightly linked, but it almost becomes like a very clear or clearly communicated way of how that new structure is going to support that long-term vision and long-term growth that the people are ultimately going to deliver, but are going to be part of, and also will hopefully reap the rewards and benefits from that as well.
Yeah, so such a good example. And maybe just thinking like we have those two pillars, the clarity, which is key to provide why is this important. We talked about communication, constant communication, putting the people first. And then there is a third pillar that I think we need to touch on. It's really about commitment. At the end of the day, I've also seen this as like sometimes changes look great on paper, same like a strategy sometimes looks great on paper, but then how do you actually like translate all of these great things on paper into reality? And that goes both for a restructure, but also for the strategy. I'm thinking restructure again. It's not just moving boxes of people around potentially. It's also just thinking about what are the processes behind it that we need to change, or maybe we can think about or starting to think about processes first. What are the processes that we're streamlining to then set up the team accordingly? And then what do you need potentially in terms of upskilling? I know we'll talk about a couple examples about Microsoft as well, but even from it for Adidas, when I was there, we moved drastically towards digital. So how does upskilling look like? And you bring your people along into more of a digital world and a digital way of working. So all of these things are important because it's, again, the one thing is on the paper, both your strategy and your reorganization. And the other element is really making it come to life and not just be like, okay, this is the reorganization. This is the strategy. Go run with it. And then the true work actually begins as well. And you want to continue to check in on both. Like you want to continue to check in with the people. You want to continue to check in, obviously, if the processes, maybe potential new processes work. You might need to have to hold new team meetings, or maybe teams have to just find each other again. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And then, of course, you're also working all on new topics, and maybe you follow a new strategy or a new plan. So you also need to check in on that. So there is a lot of work that comes after you think the work is done. Oh, this is the great plan. But then really like following that North Star and keep that up and keep that communication up. Celebrate as well. Again, keeping that future mindset and also help the organization to see that consistently and not be like, oh, I don't really like this new process. I'm going to go back to the old process. I've seen this too, and it happens.
Yeah. It's all in the execution.
It's all in the execution. Yeah.
So what would you say, like, I think we've touched on it a little bit, I think, like practical tips. So, let's imagine a listener is going through a reorg right now. I think we are definitely aligned and agreed that focusing on the culture and the people first is going to enable kind of later pieces. I think reinforcing the values of your organization, maybe even optimizing them slightly if you need to, but showing or helping your people to understand how they can actively shape the culture to support this new future, if you like, and how they can get involved in the new strategy. What else would you say are some good practical tips to walk away with today if you're in the midst of a reorg or planning a reorg?
Yeah, definitely the people first. And that is also, again, like as you're implementing, maybe there is a phased implementation or a phased approach. both for the strategy, but maybe also for the reorganization. And oftentimes that might go hand in hand as you're implementing this. You want to focus on the high impact elements of parts first, and also potentially generate some momentum, and then continue, like, learn, adapt, and continue to evolve your approach as well. And again, what we said before, even here, take the people on the journey with you, help them, let them shape it, right? Like, there is a certain guidance and a North Star that is there, and that's kind of like carved into stone potentially, but then the rest of it can be shaped by the people. They will feel a lot more empowered. They feel part of the journey, and they feel like they can actually make an immediate impact as well. So yeah, phased implementation, taking your people on the journey with you. What else would you say, Laura? Is there maybe another element that we should think about?
I think, yeah, for me, it would be like identifying like the real positive people in your organization, teams or individuals who are actually, feeling good about this. They're going to rally the people together. They're going to be able to provide positive, constructive feedback on how it's going, how, the execution of the strategy is being affected. I think, having those change champions, and it doesn't have to be as formal as, identifying them and getting them all in a room. But I think, finding the little pockets of people within your business who are going to really support you on this journey, because it's not it's definitely not a job for one person. It requires a lot of people to really help you navigate this new era. So I think, some strong people who understand the vision, they've really bought into the future, and they're in potentially influential roles or influential parts of the business, that they can really instill that positivity, I think is really important for me.
Yeah, I love that. Some change agents are always super, super important. Yeah, so I think, like, overall, again, like, a reorganization doesn't have to derail your strategy. Quite the opposite. It can actually be a really powerful accelerator when approached with intention. So thinking about that, keeping that in the back of your mind, and always thinking people first. How do you communicate everything around the strategy and the reorganization with the people first mindset can go a really long way and help you set yourself up for success in a sustainable way as well. Any
Thank
other
you, Miriam.
closing notes? No, okay, I guess not.
Well, you know what I was going to say, you mentioned a moment ago, or you dropped the carrot about Microsoft, and we didn't
That's
actually cover
right.
it. And
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking, it took me back to a time because I did a short stint at Microsoft for
Yeah.
a year or two. And so I definitely wasn't under Satya's leadership, but I think, obviously watching from the sideline when you join these incredible organizations, you always have you always have a soft spot for them. So I've definitely watched them in recent years going through, significant restructuring, moving from more of that device and service-led organization, which is what it was like when I was there, to more of that cloud-first, mobile-first company that wasn't really about cost cutting. It was really, to help them with that strategic goal of cloud innovation, and not, letting the Amazons and the other organizations of the world, or Google, for example, overtake their success. So I think that's a really cool story that people should look at and as inspiration, that their reorg actually became an enabler of their strategy rather than a distraction. And I think that's really important. If you see that reorg as being a true enabler of your strategy and helping springboard you forward, rather than it's something that's going on whilst you're also trying to execute your strategy. I think if you think in that mindset and kind of follow in their footsteps, it's a good tactic. So that's what I would finish on.
I love that. Thank you so much. All right.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap up. I think we've had a really good conversation about navigating a reorg while also executing your strategy. Hopefully you have found it insightful if you are going through this crazy time yourself, and that it helps you on your journey to better strategy execution.
Yeah. So make sure to tune in again next week when we'll be talking about another exciting topic. And it's going to be a great episode filled with great and many practical tips that you don't want to miss.
And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the Ultimate Strategy Podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Also, check out the links to our website that we mentioned right at the beginning. And a big thank you to our sponsor, Cascade, for making this podcast possible.
Thanks for listening. And remember, great strategies are only as good as their execution.
to take action, make it happen, and see the results. See you in the next episode for your weekly dose of strategy.